talked a little bit about the ethics of education technology in previous videos a little bit before. And to be clear, I'm not totally anti-technology. I think technology can be a pretty great value add, not just in the education space, but in the world. However, I do think we need to be doing it mindfully and thoughtfully and not just throwing in tools or new pieces of technology just to add new pieces of technology. And certain pieces of technology really need to be evaluated from a moral and ethical standpoint. Because, back in the day, a whiteboard was a new and innovative piece of technology. So who knows what the whiteboard is of today? The first thing I think most about is just there's a new piece of EdTech coming out. It seems pretty much every week. And while that's great in some ways, in other ways, I often wonder, are these pieces of education technology, are they really solving a problem with teaching and learning? Are they really adding to pedagogy? Or are they just, adding something shiny and fancy and new and they're not really any value add? And I think a lot of them are just fancy and shiny and not really solving any problem in teaching and learning. And so that would be my first thing as I explore various tools. My other concern is surrounding data and the data collection that is done by pretty much all of these education technology tools. I'm not totally against data collection. There's a strong argument that perhaps data might be able to, for example, flag a student earlier who's struggling. And in that way, if they're flagged earlier, maybe they could actually complete their course, complete their program. And in that regard, I think that's fantastic. If we could help with student retention, help students, be successful in the classroom, then, I'm totally 100% all for that. I do have some concerns about it, though. One is that there are some instances of false positives, and that seems to be particularly for minority groups. Basically, if you're not a white male, sometimes you're more likely to get flagged as a false positive. And if you think about it, if you're flagged for a false positive and you just get a message being like, hey, we hear you're struggling, and you're not struggling, that might be really disconcerting on the other end. So I'm not saying definitely not, but we need to be really mindful of this and think about, how are we implementing this and how good really is the data. Also, the only data that can really help with teaching and learning should be collected. We shouldn't just be collecting every piece of data. One, because, if there's all this data being collected, how do you sort through it? But also, if it's not serving a purpose to help with a teaching or learning issue, then we shouldn't be collecting it. Also, who owns the data? Is it the education technology company? Is it the school? Or is it the students? Is it the teachers? Being really clear about who owns the data. Also, who has access to the data? Can the students see the data that's being collected? Are they able to see what their teachers and administrators see? I would argue that they probably should be able to see their own data. And finally, can students opt in or out? Some folks might argue that if students can opt in or out, then that would devalue the data, but also, should they have a say in what's being collected? I don't have an answer. These are more questions, but these are things that we really need to be thinking about because a lot of these education technology tools are really relying on data collection. The other thing off of that is just being mindful of surveillance in general. So many of these tools, from the data that's being collected to sometimes just what they do in general, like these proctoring tools, really rely on surveying our students. And there needs to be some mindfulness to it. Why are we having our students turn their Zoom cameras on? Why are we having a proctoring tool, AI tool? Is it really solving a problem with teaching and learning, or should we be looking at a bigger pedagogy issue? I also would really encourage particularly administrators and senior leadership to think about, not designing policies or bringing in tools where the basic premise is not trusting students. Sure, are there going to be folks who take advantage of the system? That's true in without anything. That's just human nature. That there's always going to be someone who's trying to trick the system or take the easy way out. That's just the case. But generally, I think most students, they really just want to learn and they want to do a good job. And so rather than adding these tools that are really like their basis is about mistrusting students, I really struggle with that. And if I were a student at this time, I would really struggle with that too, and would make me feel a little bit less likely to want to even engage in learning, because if they don't, trust me, I just think that's a really uncomfortable precedent. So these are just some of the things that I think about when I think about the ethics of ed tech. And again, these are a lot of open-ended questions and just things to think about and consider as we move forward with any piece of technology, particularly in the teaching and learning space.